Welcome to Spiritual United Paradox, Literature Language of the Heart Speaker Gathering. All our speakers are shared on our WhatsApp audio groups and our speaker channels. The links will be dropped in the chat. If you're listening to this recording and need help, we have a way out that works. Please reach out and send us an email at connect@sipx.world and the crew will reach out and get back to you. We read a section of the Big Book week to week, starting from the Doctor's Opinion to page 1 to 164, and the speaker will continue with that when we open up the share. We have invited Tim J. T-Bone from California, LA, to share a message of depth and weight from the heart and the section of the Big Book. Over to you, brother.
Yes. Hello, my name is Tim. I'm an alcoholic. It's good to be here and it's good to be sober. Welcome to anyone that may be new or relatively new to the program, whichever program you're coming here with. This is a way, it's up and out, and it's a beautiful thing. And my instructions are to read from the doctor writes up until frothy emotional appeal. So again, Tim Alcoholic. The doctor writes, the subject presented in this book seems to me to be of paramount importance to those afflicted with alcoholic addiction. I say this after many years' experience as medical director of one of the oldest hospitals in the country treating alcohol and drug addiction. There was, therefore, a sense of real satisfaction when I was asked to contribute a few words on a subject which is covered in such masterly detail in these pages. We doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. What with our ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. Many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book came under our care in this hospital, and while here, he acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once. Later, he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients here, and with some misgiving, we consented. The cases we have followed through have been most interesting. In fact, many of them are amazing. The unselfishness of these men, as we have come to know them, the entire absence of profit motive, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has labored long and wearily in this alcoholic field. They believe in themselves and still more in the power which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death. Of course, an alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for liquor, and this often requires a definite hospital procedure before psychological measures can be of maximum benefit. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, and once having formed the habit and found that they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. All right, so the easiest way for me is to go back over where I started and just start going through and relating my life as to what we just read and how it started to manifest and how I got on this path of recovery. I can tell you in the beginning that I had no desire to stop drinking. I got to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous as a result of my consequences. So I did an awful lot of drinking. My life started to deteriorate, started to decline. I just continued to lower the bar to make it okay and make it comfortable for me, but I still didn't know what I was dealing with. And so I decided to jump into the military. Basically, it was a geographic to get out of town so that I could shake my life up and do something a little bit different. And I continued the same thing in the military, and they gave me an ultimatum. Either you go down and get yourself some help or we're going to kick you out. And I really didn't hear, go get some help. What I really heard was, we're going to kick you out and you got to go back to the place you ran from. And I said, I'm not going back there. So whatever it is I got to do to not get kicked out, to go back to the place where I left that had nothing and could do nothing, I'll do it. So I went down there and I got exposed to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And sitting in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I want to refer to something that's in the 12 and 12. There's a paragraph that talks about being driven into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous under the lash of alcoholism and discovering the fatal nature of our situation. And for me, sitting in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous is really what I heard, what I could possibly be suffering from, and what the possible solution was. They start talking about the phenomenon of craving, which is something that was mentioned here. They start talking about being powerless over alcohol. They start talking about that first drink. They start talking about being beyond human aid. And I had never looked at anything close to that in my relationship to alcohol. And I'm sitting there basically stunned, listening to the seriousness in which they are delivering the message. They're talking about life or death. And then we are naturally early on, I'm directed to get into the doctor's opinion. The first thing that I was directed to in one of the early meetings was the spiritual experience in the back of the book. An older lady pulled me to the side of a meeting at the end, and she asked me to read it. And I must have said something to her about the unsurety of God, because I really had some God issues. I didn't hate God or anything. I just didn't know how to utilize a relationship with God. I didn't know what faith was or any of that kind of stuff. I just didn't know. And I read the spiritual experience, and I didn't understand what I was reading. I had 45 days sober or something like that at that time. And she asked me to read it again, and I read it again, and I still didn't understand it. And later on, I began to understand what it was she was trying to tell me. She was trying to tell me that I did not have to have that sudden burst and God, just that overwhelming God consciousness, that it could come to me gradually over a period of time if I continued to stick with the saw. And I was really able to appreciate what it was she was trying to tell me, to hang in there. It's going to be all right. And so here it says the subject presented in this book, alcoholic paramount importance to the afflicted alcoholic. And one thing that I notice here, which we do a lot in sponsorship as well, is, you know, when you have a passion for having someone get an opportunity to have this way of life and move forward in this way of life, you don't care where the message comes from. So if someone's working with me, or I happen to be working with someone, and they feel that they can get the message from another direction, it doesn't matter to me. I make sure that they know, you got my number, you can call me anytime, but if you think you can hear something somewhere else that will help you save your life, that's what we're after. And so when the doctor is talking here about many years experience in really trying to work with these alcoholics, but is noticing that something is happening in another direction, his passion is that he really wants them to get to a solution. And I appreciate these doctors saying it doesn't matter if it comes from us or not. We've tried everything we know. But if there's another way that can get us to the finish line or get us to the goal, then we're all for that too. We're on board, and we're noticing that something could possibly be happening in this direction. And so whatever it is that we can do to support this direction that is getting us to where we tried to get to for years, we're all for it. There was therefore a sense of real satisfaction when I was asked to contribute a few words on the subject which is covered in such masterly detail in these pages. We doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. And we find out later on that is because it is something that is coming from the spirit and being beyond human aid, and that one person cannot do that for another person. Later on, when it goes to the frothy emotional appeal, which we haven't gotten to yet, is, you know, there's a lot of people that had mentioned some things to me. Boy, that drinking's gonna kill you. Can't you see what that drinking's doing to you? Can't you, continue to tell me things and say things, but there was nothing that they could do outside of me that would be able to promote me to move in this direction. And so when they get here and they realize they've tried everything that they've done, that they could do to get us going, they realize that this was something that was beyond their capabilities. One human trying to save another human in that aspect, without them having a psychic change or a spiritual experience. And this is something that's come to their attention. With our ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. another thing that reminds me of that I was able to notice and recognize early on in this program that was given to me by the old timers, that this program goes a whole lot deeper than knowledge. That's all through our literature, that knowledge alone could not do this, that there would have to be some action involved and some footwork and some direction that we would have to begin to apply to be different. This ultimately is going to be a transformation of our lives. We had an old timer that would say everything, and you guys probably heard it by now, that everything had to change except for the multiplication tables. And it was cute. It was kind of funny. But as I got going in this program, I realized exactly what it was he was saying. The way I was thinking, the perception that I have, the attitudes I had, everything had to go. I had to be different, but I could not create that difference in myself. I had to get to some type of power early on, just simply follow some directions from old timers and have the willingness to want to be different. And this confuses a lot of people because they don't realize how much weight that has in staying away from that drink or that fix or whatever it is. And by having a psychic change and a different attitude and perspective, one of the things that started to happen for me was I started to be more accountable for my actions. I began to learn how to put the spotlight on me, what was going on with me in these situations, which I had never done before. I had always blamed outside conditions or other people for my circumstances and would not take responsibility for it. I didn't know how. And so I was always in a defensive mode and always doing those kind of things and always trying to keep the next negative event from happening to me in my life. And so consequently, I'm walking around on guard about everything, and I could not be. I could not simply be. I could not enjoy life as it was. But, I'm still drinking, so that's all I got. That's the only tools I got. Basically, a screwdriver and a hammer, and I'm trying to beat life to death or pry it open. I'm flipping it around. I only got two tools. And there's only but so much I can do over and over, again and again, and try different forms, and that's all I had. So it says many years ago, one of the leading contributors of this book came under our care in this hospital, and while he required some ideals which he put into practical application at once. And when I read practical application, that reads to me as action. Practical app. We hear that all the time. I don't necessarily know how to do things by just reading. I need practical app. That's how it reads to me. That is hands-on. That is OJT. That is those kind of things. And so he's got these ideas and he wants to put them into motion, but he has to have action in order to go ahead and go about doing it. And so when we have these conversations and I'm being told all through this book, there's different ways that they talk about action and the practical approach and all these different things, I had to live my way into better thinking. That was something else that I was told. And that was part of my practical application. The simple things that they would tell me that started to go into this was, this is what we want you to do. When you go to work, do what they tell you. You ask them for that employment. Your name is not on the building. Just follow directions. Do what they told you. When you go home, you live there too. Don't come in and complaining about what isn't done or who shoulda or any of that kind of stuff. You contribute because you live there too. You don't have to walk around and try to be the boss of anybody or anything. That's what you do. When you're in the supermarket or wherever you are, if the line is long, there's no need to get upset. Other people shop too. Wait your turn. When the traffic, they would just break it down. They had to talk to me this way. Hey man, you're a part of traffic. You can't, you think everybody's supposed to just pull over because you got somewhere to be? Either leave earlier or drive slower. Just take it easy. And these things did not occur to me. When we're talking about selfishness and self-centeredness and me, and coming from that and being that, it had gotten so entrenched in my spirit that I could not simply do those things. And I started to begin to calm down and try to put these things into practical application. Breathe. It's okay. It's all right. You'll get there. It's okay. So it said later he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell, and I got to that already. And the story, let me see. story to other patients, to tell his story to other patients here, and with some misgiving, we consented. Telling his story to other patients, the power that I got in that which later on in our book talks about this being the main taproot, one drunk talking to another, how our whole society has sprung up. But I really started to get the sense of what the care and the delicacy in which they were delivering this message strong, but they really were concerned about making sure that I understood that they were also in that position at one point. And so they would talk about what it used to be like, what happened, and what it's like now. And many of them had a disdain for God because they blamed God for their circumstances, and because God didn't do certain things for them, they thought that God had abandoned them, left them, or wasn't in their lives. And I could definitely relate to that. My relationship with this so-called God was basically, again, which is in our 12 and 12, it talks about grant me wishes. That was my relationship with God. I needed to turn out this way. I want this, I want that, or get me out of jams. Now, I could find God then, but I didn't have a relationship with God in my daily affairs and my everyday moments. I didn't know how to do that. And so when it didn't turn out a certain way, or didn't go in a certain direction, or I didn't get what I wanted, I figured God just wasn't there for me. And so I had to find a way to abandon that relationship with God. And so what I did was, it came to mind that since you're only begging for God to do things for you in that sense, but you're not thanking God when things go well, how about you don't deal with God at all? And that way you don't have the guilt on you for just using God to get you out of jams and do things for you. So I tried to be an atheist for a minute. I tried to be an agnostic. I tried a couple of different things to try to stay away from this God issue thing. And it didn't work out well, because I found out later on that it was inherent in my spirit. And those things would always come up. I would have those things that would have a consciousness that would come up and say, that probably isn't a good idea. Maybe you should do this. But more times than not, I would blow right past that and do whatever it was that I wanted. I had not had any practice in tapping into what my spirit was saying to me, what that basic good, or that basic direction that was going on with me. I was moving too fast. I had no way of being able to apply any of that kind of stuff. So it says the cases we have followed through have been most interesting. In fact, many of them amazing. Uh, the unselfishness of these men, as we have come to know them, the entire absence of profit motive, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has labored long and wearily in this alcoholic field. I was told things like, we want the best for you like we want for ourselves. Your life getting good isn't going to affect mine. We'll go to the end of the earth with you if you're willing to stay sober. You hear this kind of stuff, but it don't really sound real. They're always going to be up to something. I haven't been around people that really would ride that hard for you, and really, that kind of, I don't know about that. But hearing them share their stories, and hearing them talk about what they came from and how they got to a power, and really wanting to convey to me that it was possible for me too, in them relating their stories, I started to really take an interest, and I started to hear some similarities instead of some differences. So that got me kind of going. But this whole thing about the community spirit and all of that, I had the opportunity to witness this from the whole time I've been in this program. Early on, somebody would be getting married, they'd rally up and go to the wedding. Somebody was in the hospital, they'd go there, and they take a meeting to them, and they just rally and say, such and such in the hospital, we're going to go down at this time, and if you guys have ever, how we do it when we go visit people in hospitals. These people are trying to tell us one or two people at a time or something like that, and they hit the corner, and there's 4 or 5 of us in there, and they're looking, and man, you must be important. It's like, yeah, well, these are just all my friends, and we try to follow the rules of the hospital and all that stuff, but a lot of times we're packed in there in support of our people, man. And once they kind of hear, well, what this may be, they kind of leave us alone, as long as we keep it down and those kind of things. But we just show up. We show up. And I was able to be a part of that. Hey, they're having a barbecue over here. You know, let's go. They take us out to breakfast. We didn't ask you if you had any money. We just asked you if you was hungry. Get in the car. This is what we're doing. We're going to drink coffee and go to breakfast. And we, crashed the joint, 10, 12, 15 of us. And I started to really see that this was actually happening. That they would, pay for these meals and do these things. I had a guy give me 2 packs of Newports and a $5 bill. And I thought, whoa, say here, man, get yourself a couple of packs of cigarettes or whatever and $5. And he did that for me. And it was real early in recovery. And it felt amazing. One thing that also they said that really hit me hard, which I have to continue to utilize today, they never asked for repayment. They always said, pass it on. A day will come where you will be so grateful for what has happened and what has transpired in your life that you will be more than willing to just pass it on to the next person that comes up behind you. And I'm telling you, when that day came and I started to realize what was happening, the thing that I thought wouldn't work, couldn't work, wasn't possible, but I was just here willing to give it a shot. That's what I did. And I looked up one day, man, I didn't have a drink, didn't want a drink, was thinking about a drink. And I said, oh my God, this might be doable. And I got scared. And then I really had to look around and realize for the first time in an awful long time, I am out here in life and I'm not drinking. I'm not getting high. I'm just here. What do I do? And they told me the same thing you've been doing. You make means, you continue to pray, you go through this process. It's still one day at a time. You just happen to realize that you are now actually entrenched in this new way of life. And there's still more for you to do. This is only a beginning. Oh, I'm going to need something like a time check too, because I don't. Oh, here it is up here. All right. Once I get going, I kind of get some momentum. But anyhow, so this unselfishness and this entire absence of profit motive. And it said, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring. And I mentioned that a little bit earlier about these doctors who have tried so hard to get us to a certain way, but to be able to start to see the way this thing is coming together and how we are helping each other and starting to do these things while staying away from that drink, he's saying is inspiring. And those who have labored long and wearily in these alcoholic field, but something is happening. We tried all we can and something is happening, but whatever it is, I'm with it because this is getting what it was we tried to get to. They believe in themselves and still more in the power which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death. That was something else that I heard, that I could die from this. I had never considered that I could die from this. In no way. Some scrapes, a couple of DUIs, flipped over, probably out of cars and all that stuff. I got some stories for you. We all do. That's why we're here. But this thing, about hearing them tell me that I could actually die from this, that could kill me in many different ways, was something that again got my attention because I hadn't really stopped and considered the road that I was going down. Of course, an alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for liquor, and this often requires a definite hospital procedure before psychological measures can be of maximum benefit. I too was one that had to be detoxed. When I went down there and got myself some help, they put me in detox. I had the intravenous feedings, those kind of things like that. The putting the nutrients back in my body, and I remember coming to in that and having a doctor stand next to me, and this doctor shook his head, and he said, "I don't know how you made it. You are so deficient in everything." He just start going down the list: magnesium, zinc, potassium, iron, calcium. He just went down the list. There was things he was saying I didn't even know was a vitamin. He said, "Man, you're just depleted. I have no idea how you are functioning." So he basically said you're blessed, basically. And they sent me out of there with prenatal pills. So you need to take these. That was the state of my condition when I got here. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not a big guy, like 5'7", 145, 150-ish. And just the majority of my body had alcohol in it. And I did not get to the cirrhosis or any of that kind of stuff, and I'm truly grateful. I don't know how I even made it to that part. But so that had happened for me, and then I was able to get to the rooms and start to hear that. That's very important. Now, I had the opportunity to see some people shake it out. It's not pleasant. We don't necessarily have to see a whole bunch of that nowadays with, detox facilities and how prevalent this has really become for us. So this is the time I have left, huh? It's 22 minutes? Okay. So with all of that going on, we don't necessarily have to see people shake it out, but there are some cases still. I got to witness a couple, as I said early on, and it's tough. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. This phenomenon of craving and this allergy was something that really got my attention as well. It talked about it a couple of pages before, about the body being as ill, quite as abnormal as the mind. And I didn't realize again what I was up against. And so when they would tell us what hit you first, the engine or the caboose, because a lot of people think they had one or two drinks too many or overshot the mark, which we tend to do. But with this phenomenon of craving thing, it is the first drink. And I never considered not taking the first drink at no point. For me to consider not taking that first drink means I don't drink. I am thinking about not drinking. I've done a bunch of things, but not drinking. I'm trying to get myself out of some scrapes and some jams and sit down and try to figure out how I can get my life back on track. But not drinking was not in the equation. I actually would have a drink and try to figure out what I'm going to do to get my life back on track. I'm realizing I got more potential than this. Something's happening. I got to do something. And I'd have that drink and I'd sit there and I'd try to reason with it and figure it out and come up with some kind of new direction and a little more willpower and put my foot down. And this time I'm going to stay in that junior college, or this time I'm going to keep that job, or this time. And I'm dead serious about this. And I take a couple more swigs and off I go. And it wouldn't pan out, but that was the best I had. So when they started talking about, I want to refer to this real quick because it's important for me at this part of the book that we're in Drs Opinion, where it talks about in this statement, this is right after William D. Silkworth, that first paragraph. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defectives. And then it goes on to say the doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion to its soundness may of course mean little, but as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. So when they start talking about the phenomenon of craving, and they started describing this to me in these meetings, and they're talking about the first drink, I was able to see that, okay, perhaps I got this, that once I take that first drink, that phenomenon of craving kicks in, and I am powerless over alcohol. I didn't understand what it meant to be powerless over alcohol, or whatever it is once I got started. And they're saying, well, if you got an allergy in it, just like anything else, once that kicks off, you're gone. You basically can be quiet. You got nothing else to say. You got it started. Now sit back and ride. It will let you know when it's done. You got nothing else to say. And I was able to see those moments in my life where I got started and really didn't have a desire to stop. But at some point, it may occur to me, you don't. But I just had to keep going and keep going and keep going. And so the main thing that I was able to line up with was me standing in morning formation. And when they were talking about the phenomenon of craving and otherwise explaining things that I couldn't account for, why I continue to go on and on and on and on, it as an ex-problem drinker, it made sense to me. I stand in morning formation, they talk about a 5 mile run. And my head's bad, my stomach's bad. Oh man, I don't want to go through, I don't want to do this. I don't. But I'm gonna have to do this. I'm gonna go through it today because I got no choice. But I'm not gonna be like this tomorrow. This is crazy. And tomorrow came, and I was in the same condition tomorrow as I was yesterday and the day before. And I just wanted to lay down that parade deck and cry. I couldn't understand why I'm out here again, standing in morning formation, head bad, stomach bad, swaying, can't even really stand straight. They talking about a 5 mile run, and I'm doing this day after day after day, and I don't know what's going on. But every evening at 4 or 5 o'clock, when they say libo, I forget what I felt like this morning. And I'm off and running again. Book talks about that. And that continued to go on for as long as I was around. And I started to line that up with what was being said and what we're reading here. There is some way that I have to stay away from that first drink, because once I take that first drink, they would describe it as I took a drink, that took a drink, and then that drink took me. That was one of the versions that I heard of how that thing got going. And being gone, and couldn't get myself up and out of it. And so when it talks about never occurs in the average temperate drinker, at this point of my drinking, when I'm doing this heavy drinking, I really wasn't around too many average temperate drinkers. We were all pretty much in the same state. We were all drinking to the end. Another thing that I heard an old timer saying, he said it real subtle. He would say, in the middle of his pitch, he would just say, drinking while drunk. And then he'd keep talking. And one day I heard it, and I popped up. And I'm like, drinking while drunk? So I set out to get drunk. I've achieved that. Why am I still drinking? I'm drunk. And I was like, that's the phenomenon of craving. And it was like, whoa. And I sat back, and he would say that, he said that for a long time before I actually heard what he was saying, drinking while drunk. And that was me all the time. I would get going to get to a certain point. And once I get to that certain point where I got that real good buzz and I feel good, now it's time to do some drinking, because I got to get to the starting point. I got to really feel it. And once I start feeling it, now it's time to do some drinking, and I'm gone. And I rearrange my life continuously behind that. Says these allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And I'm going to stop that right there too, because these old timers were talking about, they were dead serious. They were talking about reading the mouthwash. They're not using Listerine. They don't mess with NyQuil. They checking their toothpaste. They reading labels. That was to the extent that they were talking about. They was like, man, anything that looks like it's got anything to do with alcohol, I don't know. And, we kind of look at them as like, man, these cats is going a little too far with it. But as I continue to move on in this program, I understood what they were talking about. If we're coming from the type of life that they came from, these people that have been homeless or I mean, just rock bottom drunks, and now they have gotten to this portion to where they are beginning to recover and have a way up and out, they don't want any parts of anything that looks like they may have to go back to that life. And they were dead serious. They wasn't around people that were doing certain things, all that. Their whole life began to change. When they were talking about this on the previous page about the moral psychology, all through our book, there's different ways that they talk about that whole thing that came about with this psychic change, this relationship with this power. They would say things like recreate our lives, transformation, rebuild, firm bedrock, and they would continue to talk about everything having to be destroyed, the way we used to live our lives, and something new had to be built. A whole new set of principles and direction had to move forward. And this really speaks to the spiritual malady, which I knew nothing about. Coming in here in a state of selfishness and self-centeredness and trying to protect myself, I'm spending an awful lot of time at looking outside of myself, but I'm not looking at me. I don't have the vehicle. I don't have an opportunity to get myself to look at me. And so when these people are really talking about, yeah, I understand what they did and what they said and all that as we move down through the process and going through the steps. But what about you? What is your part? And we really want to emphasize how important that is in recovery and addressing the spiritual malady. And that the same person will drink again. It's more than just putting the plug in the jug. They would call that one of the guys would describe it as we didn't get sober to like walk around looking like we were baptized in lemon juice. And that was hilarious to us. But we are after being happy, joyous, and free. But just putting the plug in the jug and just not drinking is not going to get us to happy, joyous, and free. That just means we're just not drinking and we're just not getting high. But we're still irritable, restless, and discontent. And we're still treating our fellow man a certain way. And we still have these certain attitudes. And we're still blaming people. And we're still doing all these different things. And eventually, the shoe's going to have to drop. I'm going to have to do something. There has to be some type of relief valve. And for many of us, it may be going back to drinking. You throw your hands up, life is too hard, we go back to drinking. Or we put our hands on people, or we do some things that we have to lash out and react to life because we cannot allow life to be what it is. We can't simply be. We can't simply accept certain things that are going on. Lack of power is my dilemma. And I can't control myself and I can't control anyone else. And in starting to learn all of this and starting to have that practical application that they were talking about, as me being able to put this into play, I started to calm down. I've always been a hothead my entire life. Very intolerant, very impatient. I got a high degree of self-righteousness and a hothead. I have my value systems. I'm aware that I don't know everything and that my way isn't the only way to do it. I know it's not the only way to do it, but it's probably the best way to do it. And so when people don't do things a certain way or see it the way I see it, I can get irritated. And that starts to take me off into some other kind of tangent, which takes me off somewhere else. And I got resentments, which our book says is the number one offender, which I don't know nothing about yet. And all this stuff is happening. And, I'm acting crazy. Now I got the silent scorn. I'm not responding. I'm giving half-ass answers. Just the whole attitude, everything goes along with it. And that is an uncomfortable life. But through this process, when I start to begin to chip away at this transformation, I begin to allow some things that are already in me to start to come out. I start to be able to actually exercise a degree of understanding, compassion, forgiveness, tolerance, patience, these things that have always been in me, but I was not able to access or even apply. And through a relationship with a power and simply following directions, what we call contrary action, this is what we want you to do, those scenarios that I was telling you, those type of things started to contribute to me being able to experience this life completely different. And as I began to address myself in my relationship with alcohol, I found out, as our literature says, it's only a symptom, that my problem is of a much deeper nature. And that is that spiritual malady, that being separate from everyone else. I eventually got to the place to where I realized I'm one of God's kids. We're all God's kids. And I don't get to pick and choose who I'm going to be kind to based on their actions, based on if I believe they deserve it or not. And I did that for an awful long time, and that was revealed to me through inventory, that if you did a certain thing or acted a certain way, then I just couldn't be kind to you because you don't deserve to be treated that way based on your actions. Now, what gives me the right to determine who I'm going to be kind, loving, and tolerant to based on what I think their actions should or shouldn't be? And so I've had to remove that from the way I live. regardless of what is going on, I am, in my relationship with my power, designed and on a path to where I have to treat every one of God's kids a certain way, regardless of what that is. But it has taken an awful lot to get to that. The process of going through the steps over and over and over, staying in the literature, actually finding myself getting irritated and wondering why. Our book says whenever we are disturbed, there's something wrong with us. And I heard whenever I'm disturbed, it's my fault. And I'm not taking the blame for all this. That's the way I heard it. It's like, no, that's not what it says. It basically says there is something lacking in your spiritual condition that won't allow you to accept this situation as it is. What is it missing in you that will not allow you to accept this situation exactly as it is? Is it the impatience, the intolerance? Is it your self-righteousness? What is it? And so I was able to eventually get to what that was in all these different scenarios. It goes on to, I kind of went off to the side a little bit, but I was in there. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, which I never tried to do, I never tried to break the habit. I didn't realize it was a habit because I didn't understand what it truly meant to be powerless over alcohol. Over alcohol. That reminds me of something that I think it was said to Bob. Somewhere in that paragraph, I believe it said he truly didn't know what it meant to be an alcoholic. You know, and that was my thing. I didn't really understand alcoholism or being an alcoholic and all that and the ramifications of all that goes around that, more than just me drinking alcohol, but all that is coming off of me and how I'm acting and how I'm affecting other people. Because, you know, we're good for that line. I'm not hurting anyone else but myself. I'm real good for that BS. But once we get rolling, we find out that everything around us has been affected by our presence and by the way we act and by the way we carry ourselves. And it actually was quite embarrassing to see that when I was able to look at that and see that I was just, you know, I brought a lot of harm to a lot of people that I had to make right the best I possibly could. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon human things, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. I had a bunch of problems, naturally. And my approach to these problems was I couldn't get to them because, you know, I was making them so messy. I didn't know how to be solution oriented, which is something that is real strong in our particular group, being solution oriented, getting right to what that is. But when you talk about your problems pile up, I get a stack of problems, 3, 4, 5, and don't know how to start or where to start. I throw my hands up and don't do any of them. It's too much. And create more problems and stack up more problems and look at them and just continuing to try to run, duck, dodge, hide, and, you know, couldn't get away from them. And I get the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I hear a guy say, if you got 100 problems, how about you do one? That'll get you to 99. And start working your way down. One at a time. I never thought of that. But I wasn't solution oriented and I didn't have a relationship with the power and didn't have a faith and didn't have the necessary courage to approach and address these things, which is more and more revealed when we start talking about cleaning up the wreckage of our past and how we get the opportunity to, per direction and how we're told, to start chipping away at these things and allowing them to get to some type of resolution. Having some type of dignity and some type of courage to be able to approach these things. I never had that before. And that goes into an awful lot. We're talking about more than just the moral psychology, but just the actual building of character. Does an awful lot to keep us away from that first drink or whatever it is that we're doing. This really keeps me out of harm's way. When we're talking about these resentments too, really addressing the resentments. And finding out that some of these things that I didn't think they were resentments because I did not know what a resentment was. I didn't really pay much attention to what a resentment was prior to getting to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. But they really emphasized the value of being able to get with that. My thing also with people, just like the problems, um, if you hurt me or put me in a certain position, then I would just drop you. I just X you out of my life. Just stop dealing with you. That's what I do. Drop people. Forgiveness has never been high on my list. I'm an only child. Uh, and so I have issues with my mom. My dad left, when I was young. Haven't seen or heard from him in an awful long time. I don't know if he's dead or alive, but I'm sure he's blessed. And I continue to have these resentments with these other people. And I can't trust anyone. So all of that plays into what I was talking about as far as being on that protective stance and defensive posture and all that kind of stuff. And so if you burn me, I can't keep having that happen. I don't have any brothers, sisters, cousins, or anybody that's really gonna really look out for me. My protection is I don't deal with you because I can't keep doing that with you. And I'm dropping people left and right. And my sponsor is, even in the program, my sponsor mentioned to me, he's like, Tim, you can't keep Xing people out of your life. There's not going to be anybody left. You got to find a way to be able to get to some type of forgiveness and understanding of what's happening. Our book talks of one of the things that when it talks about it talks about a lot of people refer to it as a sick man's prayer, but it's nothing else is coming to me, but I can get you to it through that. Um, that they're perhaps spiritually ill. How can I best serve them and those kind of things. Now I could get to that part early on about they're perhaps spiritually sick and like us, that kind of thing. But when it goes on to talk about how can I help them, I wasn't quite there yet. I'm like, the best I got is not being irritated at them. We'll start with that. But I did get to how I could eventually help these people, one day at a time. So I see my clock is getting low. I kind of stressed it out a little bit, but I'll tell you a little bit about me. My last drink was November 30th, 1986. 2 bottles of Bartles and James wine cooler. I know if I had known that was going to be my last drink, trust me, I'd have gone out better than that. I probably would have killed myself getting in preparation for my last drink, going out with a bang. I probably would have overshot the mark. So, but what it ended up happening was I had a couple of youngsters that couldn't drive a stick, and we had to get back to base, and I'm the only one that could drive them back. So, as it was starting to get late around that time, I just needed just a little bit more, and I couldn't go as hard as I'd been going all weekend. So I just had to I just put a couple of Bartles and James in there. And then when I rolled up in there, I was told, get myself some help or I'm going to get kicked out. And that's just where it stopped. And so I'm grateful that I did not have to go back and get the new flavors or go out with a bang or make my story none of that. It happened the way it happened. I want to emphasize, if you're new, today is the day to give it a shot. You don't have to get ready to stop drinking. You don't have to get in preparation to stop using. You could just start right now, give it a shot. Hang around people who are doing this thing and living this way of life and chip away at it. Who knows? Because for me, I did not think it was going to work at all. But God is good. So I believe my time is up. I want to thank you, folk, for the opportunity to share a little bit of my experience, strength, and hope, and go through a little portion of this book. And blessings to everyone.